Welcome back to James English. I'm Jayz.
And I'm Amy. Yesterday we talked about our hometowns. Today we go one step further back.
Childhood.
The years that shaped everything.
For better or worse.
Usually both.
Talking about childhood in English comes up more often than people expect at dinner parties, on dates, in job interviews, even in professional settings where people are trying to get to know each other.
What were you like as a kid? What did you want to be when you grew up? Did you have a happy childhood? These questions open up real conversation.
And they require a different kind of English, past tense of course, but also memory language, emotional language, storytelling language.
Today, we give you all of it.
Let's start with the most common question. What were you like as a kid?
This is asking about your personality and character when you were young.
I was an outdoors kid, always outside, riding bikes, playing in the creek behind our neighborhood, building forts in the woods. My parents had to force me inside for dinner.
I was almost the opposite. I was a reader, quiet, a little shy, happiest when I had a good book in a quiet corner. My mother always said I lived more in stories than in real life.
Both of those descriptions say so much in just a few sentences.
They work because they use specific concrete details, not just I was active, but riding bikes and building forts. Not just I was quiet, but a good book and a quiet corner.
Specificity is what makes a memory come alive for the person listening.
So the first technique is replace general descriptions with specific images.
Instead of, I liked being outside, say, I spent every afternoon in the yard until the streetlights came on.
Instead of, I was a good student, say, I used to reread my textbooks just because I found them interesting. My classmates thought I was strange.
That second one also shows personality through a small funny detail, which brings us to the second technique.
Use a small story. Even a single sentence can be a story.
I once convinced my little sister that I had a superpower. She believed me for an entire year. That's a story, one sentence, and it tells you something real about who I was.
My grandmother taught me to cook when I was 7. I stood on a chair to reach the stove. That's a story too, 2 sentences.
Small stories are more memorable than facts.
Now let's talk about family. Describing your family growing up is a huge part of talking about childhood.
I grew up with my mom, my dad, and my younger sister. We were close. Not a perfect family, nobody is, but we ate dinner together almost every night, which I think says something.
I was an only child. My parents both worked very hard. They were not home as much as I sometimes wished. My grandmother lived with us, though, and she was the one who was there when I got home from school. She's the one who shaped me most, I think.
Both of those are honest. Neither pretends everything was perfect.
And that honesty is what makes them real.
Useful phrases for talking about family structure. I grew up with both parents. My parents divorced when I was young. I was raised by my grandparents. I have 3 older brothers. I was the youngest of 4. I grew up in a big, extended family.
And for talking about relationships within the family, we were very close. We didn't talk about feelings much, but we showed love in other ways. My mother was the center of everything. My father was strict but fair. My grandmother was my favorite person in the world.
Notice how those descriptions avoid judgment they describe. They don't evaluate.
That's important. When you're talking about family with someone you've just met, you want to be honest but not intense.
There's a phrase I love for this. It's complicated. If your childhood was difficult and you don't want to go deep, it's complicated signals that without shutting the conversation down.
And most people will understand immediately and move on.
Now, let's talk about school because childhood and school are inseparable.
For many learners, talking about school in English is familiar because we did it in school, but the personal conversational version is different from writing an essay.
What subject did you love? What were you good at? What did you hate?
I was passionate about literature and history. Science was painful. Math I could do, but I never enjoyed it. P was complicated because I was not naturally athletic.
I was a science kid. Biology, chemistry. I loved understanding how things worked. English was easy for me in terms of the language, but I didn't love analyzing poetry.
Now we can practice phrases. I was always better at blank than blank. My favorite subject was blank because blank. I struggled with blank. It just never clicked for me.
That last one is particularly powerful in conversation. Everyone remembers a teacher who changed something for them.
I had an English teacher in secondary school. Her name was Mrs. Zhao, who made me fall in love with writing. She told me once that the best writers write to understand, not to impress, I think, about that sentence still.
That's a beautiful memory. And notice how Amy included the actual words the teacher said. A quote inside a memory makes it unforgettable.
If you can remember something someone said to you as a child, use it, even if it's rough around the edges.
Now let's address something that comes up a lot. What to do when your childhood was genuinely hard.
Many people grew up with financial difficulty, family conflict, illness, pressure, loss.
You don't owe anyone the full story in a casual conversation, but you also don't have to pretend everything was easy.
There's a way to be honest and still keep things appropriately light.
We didn't have a lot of money growing up, so we got creative about entertainment that acknowledges difficulty and immediately frames it with resilience.
My parents had a hard time for a few years, but we got through it. It taught me not to take stability for granted. Again, honest, brief, and forward-looking.
I grew up fast. My family needed me to be responsible early. I don't resent it. It made me who I am. That's a more complex version of the same thing.
All of these are real. None of them demand sympathy or require the listener to say the right thing.
That balance matters. You want to be authentic without making the other person feel like they've accidentally opened something difficult.
Now let's talk about dreams. What did you want to be when you grew up? Is one of the most universal questions.
And the answers are often funny in retrospect.
I wanted to be an archaeologist. I was obsessed with ancient history. I had a small notebook where I drew imaginary maps of civilizations. I was 7, fully convinced I would discover something important.
I went through phases: astronaut at 5, professional surfer at 10, marine biologist at 12. I genuinely thought I would save the oceans. Then I discovered that marine biology involves a lot of math and recalibrated my ambitions.
These stories are charming because childhood dreams are always a little innocent and a little earnest.
Useful phrases: when I was little, I was convinced I would become blank. I went through a phase where I wanted to be blank. My dream job changed about every 6 months. I never really had one clear dream. I just knew I wanted to do something that mattered.
That last one is interesting because it's actually more sophisticated than a single childhood dream.
Some people didn't have a fantasy job. They had a feeling, a direction that's worth saying.
Now let's look at how to talk about the differences between your childhood and childhood today.
This comes up constantly with people from different generations or different countries.
It's a fascinating topic because it reveals so much about culture.
Growing up in San Diego in the 1990s and early 2000s, we had no Snapcates. We had one family computer that connected to the internet through a telephone line, which made a terrible sound and took forever.
Growing up in Shanghai, I remember the city transforming around me. Buildings going up, new metro lines opening, the 2010 World Expo, which felt like the whole world had come to our city.
Two very different childhoods in two very different places, but some things are universal.
The embarrassing phase, every person has one.
The teacher you were terrified of.
The food you loved that adults thought was strange.
The thing you were convinced you were good at that you were actually terrible at.
These universals are what create connection across cultural difference.
When you're talking to someone from a different background, lean into the universal details and let the specific cultural ones be interesting rather than separating.
We had this game we used to play in the street. I'm sure you had something similar. That phrase, I'm sure you had something similar, invites connection.
Let's also talk about how to use used to and would for describing childhood habits.
Both of these forms describe things that were true in the past, but are no longer true now.
I used to spend summers at my grandparents' house in the mountains. That means I did it regularly and repeatedly, but I don't do it anymore.
We would eat dinner together every Sunday, no matter what. My grandmother would make the same dish every time, and we all pretended to be surprised. Would here captures something habitual, almost ritual.
The difference is subtle but real. Used to is often for states or general habits. Would is often for specific repeated actions.
You can mix them. I used to love weekends because we would walk to the market together. My grandmother would stop at the same stall every time and haggle over the price, even though she knew the vendor for 20 years.
That's a rich, textured memory, and it uses the grammar naturally. Let's also talk about how to describe the specific texture of your childhood. Not just facts, but feel.
What do you mean by texture?
The sensory details, what childhood smelled like, sounded like, felt like on an ordinary Tuesday afternoon.
I love this for me. Childhood has a very specific texture. The sound of my grandmother cooking in the kitchen, early in the morning, the smell of particular food that meant the weekend.
Those are so specific, and they are completely recognizable to anyone even though the details are uniquely yours.
That is the paradox of personal memory. The more specific you are, the more universal it becomes.
For me, childhood feels like outdoor air, like the particular cold of ocean water in the morning, like the sound of a screen door banging shut.
You can use phrases like, childhood for me smells like blank, or the sound I most associate with growing up is blank, or when I close my eyes and think about being 8 years old, I always picture blank.
These are poetic constructions, but they are also completely natural in conversation. People use them all the time when they are talking about memory.
Now let's talk about something that often comes up when people from different cultures discuss childhood: expectations.
The things that were expected of you as a child.
In my childhood, family expectations were very present. What was good for the family? What would make the family proud? What role you played within the group? Those things mattered enormously.
In the American context I grew up in, there was more emphasis on individual expression, making your own choices, finding your own path that was encouraged from a young age.
Neither is better or worse. They are just different orientations, but they shape everything about how you see the world.
Being able to articulate that in English, to explain the values behind your childhood, is a sophisticated skill, and it creates deep conversation.
Phrases for talking about cultural expectations. Growing up, I was taught that blank. There was a lot of pressure to blank. In my family, blank was very important. I was raised to believe that blank. It was just understood that blank.
And then you can invite the other person in. Was it similar for you growing up?
That question is one of the best in cross-cultural conversation.
Now let's talk about what we carried from childhood into adulthood, the habits, the values, the quirks that followed us.
I still read before bed every night. I have done it since I was 6. It is as necessary to me as sleep itself.
I still wake up early, even on vacation. I became a morning person at 11 because of surfing, and I never switched back.
These small carryovers from childhood are fascinating, and talking about them creates intimacy quickly.
You can say, I have always been blank, ever since I was little. Or, it is something I carried from childhood that I have never lost. Or, my mother used to say exactly that, and now I say the exact same thing.
That last one, inheriting your parents' phrases, is something almost everyone relates to.
There is nothing quite like hearing your own parents' words come out of your mouth.
And realizing where you actually came from.
Now let's practice the full structure together. Make them specific. Include at least one detail that surprises you when you think about it now. Then share them with someone in English. That's the whole point.
Let's close with a bigger picture. Why does talking about childhood matter?
Because it's where identity comes from. When you tell someone about your childhood, you're explaining why you are the way you are.
Your values, your fears, your sense of humor, your relationship with risk and comfort and family, all of it starts somewhere early.
And when you share that in English, you're not just practicing language, you're inviting someone into your story.
That's the deepest form of conversation, and English is just the vehicle.
Today's vocabulary for review for describing character as a child: adventurous, curious, shy, bold, mischievous, sensitive, independent, a homebody, a people pleaser, a dreamer.
For talking about family, close-knit, strict, relaxed, traditional, unconventional, warm, reserved, complicated.
For talking about school: struggled with, excelled at, found it easy, never clicked with me, was passionate about, dreaded.
For childhood memories, I remember when one thing I'll never forget. The best part was, what I miss most is.
and for talking about how childhood shaped you. It taught me. I think that's why looking back, I can see that. I didn't realize it at the time, but
That last group is powerful because it connects past to present, and that connection is what makes a childhood story meaningful rather than just nostalgic.
we all came from somewhere, and we all have a story worth telling.
Tell yours in English today.
Thank you for being here. We'll see you tomorrow.
Take care.